began to come out, information that proved dramatically and indisputably the true nature of the conspiracy behind this horrible crime. We learned that at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Building 7, a 42-story glass and steel structure located across the street from the World Trade Center, collapsed. It was not hit by any planes at all. It appeared to have suffered only minor damage, but nevertheless it simply fell down in what is clearly and classically a controlled demolition. But you ain't heard nothing yet. Larry Silverstein, the leaseholder of the World Trade Center, accidentally told PBS that he had the building demolished.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
Outrageous. Simply outrageous. It takes months of preparation and planning to do a controlled demolition like this one. They had to have put these charges in place before September 11th. Larry Silverstein was kind enough to tell us that they demolished this building on September 11th.
And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building.
But who was they? And are we supposed to think that they didn't have explosive charges in place in the Twin Towers? Of course they did. Now, this video is called Justice for 9/11 because we want to see the guilty parties arrested and punished. Silverstein knows who they are. He tried to collect $7 billion from his insurance company for the attacks. He's in league with the killers. And based on this evidence, he should be arrested and prosecuted. And who else should be punished?
Welcome to the Gilchrist Experience. As you know, this is September the 14th. We had all these celebrations on anniversary of the 15th year of 9/11. So we're just giving you a little rerun on the truth about 9/11. Now, why is it at 5:20 in the afternoon, Building 7 fell? Never mind the other 210-story buildings falling in 10 seconds each. Now, these were all planned demolition, a preview to the reasons why they went into Iraq with the list of weapons of mass destruction. Welcome to the show today, Professor Jeffries, Professor Leroy Baylor, and of course, my co-host, Graham Weatherspoon. All right, Doc, we see the big lie of the 21st century, the falsehoods about 9/11, and the big celebration we just passed this weekend. Tell us your take on this one. And I might bring out that there were important people in the Building 7, which fell at 5:20 in the afternoon.
And there were also some serious supplies of bullion, gold bullion.
In the World Trade Center.
And the satellite buildings around the World Trade Center. So a conspiracy and is a part of history. And so I think we need to look at history in a serious way, analyzing things in terms of that. You mentioned the 21st century, but the entrance of the 20th century, you have plenty of instances of conspiracy. We always talk about San Juan Hill and the Rough Riders and Teddy Roosevelt, but no serious mention of the black troops that were used to soften things up. And so, you know, the Maine and that period of time at the turn of the 20th century,
1898,
and the excuse of it that it supplied to those who wanted to go to war. And then you come into the middle of our past century and you've got the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. Before that you had the bombing of Pearl Harbor. So, I mean, you could have a nice history of these questionable...
Before the invention of cell phones and all that other stuff, people were able to get away with these things. But in these modern times, to see 15 years later, for them still to claim a 110-story building was fell by cause of 2 planes, which is impossible to even fathom physically. Right. And Leroy and I went over a radio program, Gary Knoll, who I listened to for an hour, and his recollection of what happened on 9/11 was he had an architect on. Tell us a little bit about that story.
He had architects and engineers. It's called the website is Architects and Engineers. Actually, you go into Google, Architects and Engineers. And I interviewed the man who started, or the head. His name is Gage. And what Gage explained, he said, look, I'm a Republican. He said, and I'm caught up in the tragedy just like anyone else. But someone brought it to his attention. He's either an engineer or architect, whichever one. And he began to look at it very closely, what happened, because when you see the buildings over and over again being hit by a plane and then falling and falling, it imprints that message on your mind that it happened that way, even though you're looking at a controlled demolition. Right. Because you've seen stadiums and old hotels come down in a control. But what threw me at that time, they said, and it came down in its own footprint. Right. I'm saying, what are they talking about? Meaning it came straight down, it didn't spread out. And so Gary Knoll, I owe a lot of respect and credit to, because when that event happened in 2001, the very next, within a week, he had on a special on WBAI. Could have been within days, but within that week. And he had every individual who had an insight on what happened, including Peter Dale Scott. Peter Dale Scott is in Canada. Peter Dale Scott's importance is that he points out that the British were ready to go into Afghanistan when the World Trade Center went down. And shortly after the World Trade Center goes down, they go into Afghanistan because the Taliban was tied in, so-called tied in. And what we know about that is that the opium, or the poppies had been down. They had, the Taliban had brought it all the way down to 5%. Right. They had wiped out the trade. Which that particular, from what I understand, that particular harvest of a poppy in Afghanistan goes directly to Britain, meaning, you know, in terms of the drug trade, in terms of the money laundering. But I'll cap it this way. The building goes down, and I'm caught up in this thing. I'm saying, wow, I do a radio show at that time. I'm saying, wow, man. I said, let me call Dick Gregory. So I called Dick Gregory, and he comes on the show the next Sunday. Okay. Dick Gregory tells me, he said, get the movie Long Kiss Goodnight with Sam Jackson. Okay. The movie is The Long Kiss Goodnight. Okay. And it has a scene in there, one scene in there, where the guy says, look, we bring down, we create a catastrophe and we just blame it on the Muslims. Right. And this is made before the World Trade Center comes down. Okay. All right? He also pointed out in the Bible where the World Trade Center, well, it talks about 2 towers coming down. And so he reveals things. Gary Knoll reveals things, so I'm no longer a part of the ordinary population believing what happened, because I got this information coming in. And the last but not least is Minister Farrakhan. Right. Minister Farrakhan in 2012, 2013 did a the time of what must be done, a whole piece on the World Trade Center. In addition, the Final Call newspaper has been the only paper, the national paper, to come out with the truth on the World Trade Center. So there's no reason why black people should not know the truth, simply because you got Dick Gregory going around talking. You got Gary Knoll, who a lot of black people listen to. Some people don't like him, but he produces the truth. You got Guns and Butter, another program comes on BAI. You got Minister Farrakhan producing The Final Call, and this is the current issue of The Final
Truth
Call.
about 9/11. Oh,
This is
wow.
9/11
Okay.
Truth, and it goes into all kinds of details that other papers do not go into. Black people have no reason not to know.
Well, Graham and I have been talking about this 9/11 since 9/11 happened. I mean, we gave some of the first few shows, I think it was 2000. I've taken some of these repeats here from a show we did in 2003. And I called him today, and I was especially interested in Building 7, which came, I mean, this is obvious planned demolition. No plane hit Building 7, there's no serious fires, and no reason in the world that this building came down. I was trying to figure out why this building came down, and some of the list of people that were in the building was Solomon and Barney, Internal Revenue Service. The Secret Service had 2 floors in there. And also the Security and Exchange had 3 floors. And the New York City Office of Emergency Management had 1 big floor on 23, which is Giuliani's safe space. So why did they take Building 7 down? What, was there some kind of record keeping in there they were trying to hide?
One of the, you remember Enron?
Right.
Now that case was being handled by a law firm at 425 Lexington Avenue, Simpson, Thatcher, and Bartlett.
Okay.
The records regarding Enron were being stored at the World Trade Center.
Okay.
You mentioned the U.S. Treasury.
Building 7?
I'm not sure if it was 7 or 2. I had been to Secret Service. I was detached to the Secret Service when Ronald Reagan was president. So I was in and out of the Trade Center on a regular basis. My wife's uncle was the chief operating officer of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey.
Okay.
His office was up on the 86th floor. We assumed that he was dead that day because we didn't hear from him, but he had gone to vote. So he got to work late. But when he got there, he wound up saving the lives of many Port Authority personnel himself. But the gold bullion that you mentioned, the military came in to retrieve that gold bullion because the quote-unquote heroes and the mafia and the construction people were trying to break into the vaults to retrieve that gold bullion. There were many items stolen. There was a fire truck that I saw. It was a crushed hook and ladder. And it had the clothing that was stolen from the Gap store in the shopping concourse. A lot of stuff was stolen. They went into One World Financial Center, which is across West Street on the west side of the highway. They went through that building. It had been hit with beams from the collapsing Trade Center. They went in there and stole PDAs, computers, all sorts of merchandise, not merchandise, but equipment that belonged to the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, and they are a wealth management bank. They don't do street services. So we had to lock that building down so they couldn't go back in and steal anything else. What they were concerned with was that the bearer bonds, which were scattered across their trading floor like carpeting. Now, the trading floor, the building is about, it's about an acre, 200 by 200 feet. Imagine a trading floor littered with paper, but each sheet of paper is worth more than $1 billion.
Bearer bonds, or whoever bears the bond.
Whoever bears that bond gets paid the cash value of that bearer bond.
So it's like loose money out there in the street.
Those bonds were scattered all across their trading floor, and we came in to lock the building down to keep the heroes out of the building, because God forbid they found the bearer bonds, they'd have been gone with that. So
where would you take the bearer bonds if they knew that it came from the World Trade Center?
you could sell a bearer bond off market
For less than what it's
for $100 million, and then on the black market they would manipulate it. But you see, all that, those things are tied into Interpol. They're not hard, they're not that easy to negotiate, but they can be negotiated.
Okay.
And in the chaos behind 9/11, they might not have had anybody to track the bonds.
Okay.
Lots of communication was down. Communication was down. You mentioned the opium.
Oh, yeah.
Very true.
Yeah.
I did an article, I think, for Afro Times, and I said, you're going to see heroin back because the Taliban cut the heroin trade, which sustains a lot of the American and British banks.
Right.
And when you study history, as the professor does, you have to look at the history of Iraq as it relates to Great Britain and the U.S. It wasn't Iraq, it was Iran. BP went into Iran in the late 40s to drill for oil and was cheating the Persians on the oil, and the Persians put them out. BP came here and collaborated with the CIA, and they went back and collapsed the government and then put in the Ayatollah, and BP went back to get the oil. And we've got to look at the collaborative efforts.
So give me a reason for taking down the World Trade Center.
Well, one of the architects of that building was the black guy from Brooklyn. I don't remember his name. I believe he has since passed. But he said they built that building to take the impact of a Boeing 707, which was the largest commercial jet at that time. My mother was in the Empire State Building when it was struck by a B-29 back in the 40s.
Right.
The Empire State Building did not fall down.
Right.
The World Trade Center could have taken a greater impact, and there was no reason for it to fall. None whatsoever.
Why was it taken down? Just to start a war, to go get Iraq? Why was this planned?
When I was studying military science.
Let's go back to Silverstein, who we saw in this last piece. Now, we know Silverstein goes back 6 months or 9 months prior to that. He leases the 2 buildings, and he insures them for double indemnity.
Yeah.
All right?
He did that on the plaza. He signed that contract with Governor Pataki and Rudy Giuliani standing there as he was signing it.
Now,
and
this is 9 months prior to the taking down the... So this was obviously planned with Silverstein and a bunch of other people. But what I find curious is who was in Building 7, which it was obviously... I mean, that's the most obvious planned demolition. Never mind the two towers. But number 7 is more interesting to me because they took till 5 o'clock in the afternoon to take this building down.
And the buildings came down in less than 2 hours. The burn time on the steel is more than 2 hours with the coating that they put on the steel. So there's no way the buildings could have even fallen, let alone the fire caused them to collapse.
Well, we know it's thermite used because of the radiation particles on Gary Knowles' show. They mentioned that there's radiation particles. There was steel still burning 6 weeks afterwards. Molten steel, 6 weeks after the demolition.
And the fire department had affirmed that. They said it was cordite that was used. And it was interesting, while I was down there, they said, this is a federal crime scene. So you can't take pictures. Federal crime scene. But all of the evidentiary material was put on barges and shipped over to Japan to melt down and make Toyota or whatever they're making.
So who's behind all this?
Well, I go back to 1999 when I sat with an agent of the U.S. government. I was summoned by a minister at my church to meet with a guy who had some issues and he wanted to talk to somebody. And they thought I should be the one to talk to him. Our conversation was 2 hours. In that conversation, he mentioned the destruction of the World Trade Center in 1999. He mentioned other people that he had assassinated for this government over the years. So when this event happened, it wasn't a surprise to me. Right. Because he told me then, he said, if you don't see me in 2 weeks, they got me. I never saw him again. And the fact that we were at that place and time is not coincidental because he had been to another church all the way downtown Brooklyn. His soul was bothering him. His question was, will God forgive a man that's committed murder? That was his question. He went to another church. He said, well, they told him, come back in an hour. We started in an hour. He left, got in his car, and just drove off. He didn't know where he was going. And he wound up at my church. Thinking back, he had been to a funeral many years before, and he asked somebody, well, where is that? Isn't this a church such and such around here? They said, yeah, 6 blocks, hang a right, you'll see the buildings there. So he didn't know where he was going. But the Spirit of God led him to that corner and then brought him there, and the minister brought him to me. It's not about me, it's about the question that he had. His soul was bothering him because he had done 18 assassinations for the United States government.
Wow.
So we talked for about 2.5 hours. I said to him, you need to worry more about your relationship to God than you are with this government, because all these people are going to be dead themselves one day. We're all going to be dead. And God isn't going to ask you anything about the United States or a flag or anything like that. So he told me specifically, if you don't see me in 3 weeks, you know they got me. Because he wasn't supposed to be in the United States at that time. We had a very extensive conversation. So when this thing went down, it was no surprise to me.
Still, again, why Building 7? Is it because of Secret Service and Internal Revenue and the Security Exchange and Giuliani's office, emergency offices in the building?
Giuliani is a non sequitur of this thing.
Well, look what he's doing today. I mean, you can see all the demons in him by what he appears today.
He's not important now.
Well, he's important to Trump.
We have to have people thinking in a certain way. This is one of the things they taught us in military science when I was studying up at CCNY.
That's a good school.
Good school, very good school. Some great people have attended and taught there, you know. I'll try and think of one or two. But my Lieutenant Colonel Earl D. Woods, the father of Tiger Woods, was my military science, one of my military science instructors. He said, we have to formulate the thinking of the people with regard to Vietnam at that time, because the Vietnam War was going on. But we turned patriots into traitors. We do all sorts of things to determine the thinking of the people. And when the people are thinking the way we want them to think, we can move ahead with our overall objective. This is called an operations order, an ops order. It's done in military, in battle plans. It's done with the civilian population as well. So everybody jumped on board. Oh, the Muslims, the Arabs, this and that. Oh, they attacked us. Nobody attacked. No one can attack you. And I know people say conspiracy. This is not a conspiracy. This is a historical fact. What happened is a historical fact. I used to be at Langley Air Force Base quite regularly, and Langley is across the street from the CIA. All right? Now, every time I was in Langley, there were jets on the tarmac because their job is to protect the mid-Atlantic region of the United States. The White House, the Capitol, everything in Washington, that's a no-fly zone. They got that.
All right,
but there was no planes in Langley on the day of 9/11. Right. How do you have an Air Force base?
Well, we know what they were doing. All right, let's go to the Pentagon tape, and we'll talk about that joke. All right, and we'll come back to so you run the Pentagon tape, and we'll be right back at you.
Gave an order not to shoot, or else no doubt there would have been shots fired. The question is, who gave the order? And just as Silverstein accidentally told PBS that they had explosives in place in Building 7,
and they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
Norman Mineta, the Secretary of Transportation, accidentally told the 9/11 Commission who gave the order not to attempt to intercept or shoot down the planes. Mineta testified that at 9:28 he was in a bunker under the White House with Vice President Cheney.
There was a young man who would come in and say to the Vice President, the plane is 50 miles out, the plane is 30 miles out. And when it got down to the plane is 10 miles out, the young man also said to the Vice President, do the orders still stand? And the Vice President turned and whipped his neck around and said, of course the orders still stand. Have you heard anything to the contrary?
Cheney said, "The order still stands," and a few moments later a plane smashed into the Pentagon. A giant, slow-moving 757 that could not even have penetrated Pentagon airspace on September 10th. On September 11th, not only penetrated Pentagon airspace but crashed into the Pentagon. So what was Cheney talking about when he said, "The order still stands"? What order still stands? Obviously, with all the vast defenses in place to protect the Pentagon, if it was an order to shoot, the plane would have been shot down, no? Isn't that obvious? If it were an order to shoot, the people who failed to fire even one shot would have incurred the wrath of Dick Cheney, would have been court-martialed instead of promoted, no? If it were an order to shoot, the young man would not have run to Cheney to find out if the order still stood. He would have been busy carrying out the order to shoot, obviously. So it's also obvious that Cheney had ordered the defenses not to shoot, but to stand down. He had ordered no shots to be fired. No wonder the young officer couldn't believe it. Can you believe it? Because Monetta's sworn testimony provides the clearest possible evidence for a criminal indictment to be brought against Cheney. And this indictment must be brought against him and the rest of these criminals before they kill again. If we don't stop them, I'm afraid, we will deserve what we get. These criminals have already been shown to have used anthrax, biological weapons from military stockpiles, against American citizens, including U.S. senators. What this article says is that the anthrax which killed secretaries in Senator Daschle's offices matches exactly the DNA of the anthrax manufactured by the U.S. military. Both samples had to have come from the exact same cow. They've already been shown to be studying methods for delivering weapons massively against the American people. Please, for your own sake, for the sake of your children and grandchildren, sign this petition. Take it and circulate it and return it to us. It may already be too late to stop them, but it's way too early to quit trying.
Now, most of this stuff you can't find on the internet. You know, I happen to find, I guess you still can find something. But what do you think of this one?
Well, it's not surprising in the sense that when you hear these things that we're laying out now, you know, we've been duped. We have a paralysis of analysis. There are larger forces at work. When people talk about an invisible government, there are invisible forces that are working together to control the economy of the global community.
Mm-hmm.
They have their own mechanisms for control. They're not voting in elections. They meet and they decide what to do. And there's a culture of rich white men with property and power dominating the world scene. It's been happening for hundreds of years. The founding of America, we're worried about a flag. The young man out in San Francisco, he's trying to make a statement about what we think is real is not real. That flag represents not the death of soldiers. It represents folks who put a governmental structure together so they could control economics and use the power of the government, not for a democracy, but to allow the properties and the rich people to prevail. So what we're seeing, the whole question of, when Graham was mentioning Iran, I had a special relationship with Iran going back to the 50s, when one of the young men that I graduated Lafayette College with specifically went to Iran. I went to Switzerland to study international affairs. He went to Iran. And it was always peculiar. What is happening in Iran? And there was a special relationship over the question of oil, et cetera, and who's going to control. And so big money, powerful forces, they have their plans. And they use a bamboozling process to keep us confused about it. Systems analysis will allow us to reveal much more than normally would happen, and that's what we're talking about as we lay out these different pieces, that there's an international system which is above us, which is, you know.
So we're exposing the Illuminati to
well,
folks?
I don't even want to use those names because that creates a paralysis of analysis. This process has been going on before there was an Illuminati, if there was one. Rich folks meet and map out. How did a person like Leopold II get control of the Congo in the 1880s? One man controlling land as large as Western Europe and 80 times larger than Belgium. How could that happen? How could one man take somebody else's land?
Was it not the Masonic order back then?
Well,
you've got different groups, whether it's the Bilderbergs, the Illuminati,
right.
the Haps.
You had a whole question of merchant bankers,
Mm-hmm.
and the Habsburg Empire was handled by them. I mean,
South Africans?
No,
well,
that's before the South Africa.
Right.
Long before South Africa.
Weren't the Bilderbergs down in South Africa?
That came later.
Right.
Rothschild?
Well, if you want to take Rothschild, if you want to raise these names, you have to apply them to the system where rich folks got together, sat down, and planned. So Rothschild, you got to take them back to
South Africa?
To Napoleon.
Napoleon, okay.
The wars that allowed for the Rothschild family to become a powerful force linking up with other powerful forces. So it's no conspiracy, it's what they do. I mean, their histories are there, and we're not supposed to know it because we've been told to.
So what is Trump a part of? Billionaire club? Egomaniacs?
He's not old money.
He's not old money.
He's not old money.
He's just a modern day buffoon?
No, what is
Con?
the process that
New York Con.
The process that Trump has been involved in should allow us to put a systems analysis to the larger question. Obviously, I was looking at a TV program in which Trump was very proudly putting together $1 billion+ for the Taj Mahal in Atlantic City. And it flopped on open day. And the bankers that had financed it sat down and said, look, we're going to lose so much money if we take him down. He's obviously finished. So they agreed. It was put on the TV. They agreed that they would keep him afloat and that they would use his name as a brand.
Yeah.
But he would not have control over these buildings and whatnot, that we're going to allow him to. They were working out the whole system that we're talking about.
Hang your
Too
name.
big to fail.
Right, hang your name.
Trump,
people
too
want to
big
be,
to fail.
oh, Trump.
Yeah.
It's just,
The symbol of billions of dollars.
you can take
Trump.
it, you can bring it back down to something like Nike. You can bring it down to Sean John.
Mm-hmm.
When people fail to have a self-identity, they want
take
to
someone
identify with something. They think it's status to say I live or my business is in Trump Tower, because and when you have business, your zip code is important, the street that your business is on. So by them marketing Trump, put him out there as the front guy. But I'll tell you this, I spoke with somebody traveling on the campaign this week. Mm-hmm. They said not once, but more than once, Trump's rallies have been canceled in the Midwest and the West because his checks bounced. For a rally, they shut down a couple of arenas because his checks bounced. So this is all smoke and mirrors with regard to who he is and what he has. And we may have seen the same show.
We got 14 million people who voted for him.
Well, intelligence is not something that's commonly had. So,
but that's scary. That's scary.
Brothers, I think, when we look at Trump, my experience is looking at what he has stirred up. He didn't create those 14 million people.
Right.
All right.
They
What
were
he
ready,
stirred
they
up.
were ready for something.
On the opposite side is what Bernie Sanders stirred up, or who gravitated towards him. Is what about
Was that
their
realistic?
platforms drew these people
Was
or have
Bernie
drawn
Sanders
these people out?
realistic? Free tuition?
I'm just talking about tapping into something that's already there. Dissatisfaction on both sides. You got so-called supremacists who are dissatisfied and have been dissatisfied with what's going on. And then you have...
By having a black president for 8 years. That's what's upsetting them more than anything else.
That's part of it. But when you go back to Ronald Reagan, he's always... They have always found a black scapegoat. And Ronald Reagan was the black woman on welfare driving a Cadillac. and so forth and so on. But the going back to your question about building number 7 and listening to Gary Null, I have not heard anyone talk about why they took it down, but that it was taken down. All right.
Yeah.
The Pentagon. No, I'm sorry. You also mentioned, you know, why the World Trade Center buildings coming down, and what came out during the, you know, the truth in 9/11 truth is this plan that they've always had called Operation Northwoods, and that was developed during the time of the Cuban crisis, the taking over of airplanes, flying them in. Right.
I have a copy of that order.
Operation Northwoods.
Northwoods. I have a copy of that, and Kennedy said no, and was highlighted, no, we're not going to start killing our own at this time. That's what Kennedy said with regard to that, because the government hired, I hate to cut into you,
No.
A guy named Corrillos. He was working for Daddy Bush. He was a murderer. He was a terrorist. He blew up a plane with some Cuban soccer players on it years ago. And Castro was to speak at the Pan Am conference.
What year are we talking?
This is going back into the 70s, 70s, early 80s. And Castro was to speak at the Pan American Conference in Panama. The U.S. got their old boy Corrillos to go down there and assassinate Fidel, or try again. Fidel's intelligence teams were in Panama, in the airport 6 months before Fidel was due. And they were watching every human being that got off a plane coming through that terminal. And they spotted Bush's Corrillos. They called Havana. Havana sent the warrant that they had for Corrillos for blowing up the plane and killing those soccer players. They sent it to Panama. Fidel's boys followed Corrillos to his hotel. The Panamanian police came in. They seized him in his room with another gentleman. And he had the floor plans to the building where Fidel was to be speaking. His weapon of choice to kill Fidel Castro was C4.
C4.
So he wasn't going to kill Fidel Castro. He was going to blow the entire building up with all the leaders of the Caribbean, Central, and South America.
Wow. That's terrorism, man.
This is what the U.S. was planning. So, and you don't hear about this. The only person that reported it was Amy Goodman on Democracy Now! And ironically, 2 weeks after 9/11, I was calling a guy named William Cooper, who wrote the book, Behold the Pale Horse. I was calling William. We had been in touch. I'm calling his house, and it kept going into fax mode. What is going on here? Well, I'm listening to Amy. And she said, last night, William Cooper was murdered in his house by federal agents. Now, William Cooper wrote a very intense expose on U.S. intelligence and what they were doing. They said he was crazy. But he talked about microchips back in 1990, that they were being used then. So all of the stuff that he wrote about, people said he was crazy, he was this, that, and the other. They took him out.
Well, you know, things aren't easy to hide like they were back then. Again, I'm going back to the Pentagon. Why fake like you're hitting the Pentagon and the plane veered 100?
There was no airplane.
There
was no airplane.
Well, as the piece said, whatever it was, because there's no engine outside, there's no refuge.
There are no wings, there's no airplane fuselage, there's nothing. A plane never hit it.
How did they get away with this today?
People get caught up in the emotion of it all. The Republican theme, tell the lie long enough and they'll believe it.
Right. Well, that's what's happening now. They told lies on Obama for 8 years. And where are we now?
He's a Muslim. He's born in Kenya.
I mean...
He's a Muslim. Right. He's born in Kenya.
But look...
he's a Muslim.
And Trump is saying, I'm not talking about it anymore. I mean, where are we today? Up to the 20... I mean, if Hillary gets sick or something happens to her, we got Trump as president.
No, you don't. No, you don't. The Democratic Party will come up with another candidate. They have to. Or the election would be postponed.
And the larger issue in terms of us understanding these circumstances, we're talking about a presidential election. In the formation of this nation, they put in place a process so that the popular vote would not elect the president. That the president would be elected by the Electoral College.
Well,
and we still are focusing on the vote when it's going to be the Electoral College that is going. So we missed the point that we talk about democracy. It wasn't a democracy, it was a slavocracy. And we talk about freedom, justice, and equality. All men are created equal, endowed with their creator with certain inalienable rights, among these, life, liberty, and the pursuit of Negroes. I mean, life, liberty, and happiness. And the slave owners all were there. The American government formation is a conspiracy to take the slave economic process from the British and pass it on to this so-called founding fathers, all of whom were slave masters and slave owners. And I still don't know why there isn't a document listing all of them, all of the Africans they had enslaved, their property and whatnot. And that would have let us know that this was not formed, this nation was not formed as some idealistic democracy. It was formed as an oligarchy with the mirage of democracy.
Even Lincoln in the Emancipation Proclamation, that writ was written to the states that had seceded from the Union. So they were not even under his control at the time.
That's right.
So, and Lincoln had said that a Negro was not equal to a white. He said he would never put a Negro as equal to a white.
Well, this is doom and gloom to anybody under 30, you know. We know the past,
right.
But today America celebrates freedom in the world, and we're supposed to represent the nation of immigrants, and you can find your way. Anything you want to do in life, you can do it here. Now, if you come up with that framework, even being black, you can do anything you want to do, because there's no limitations to what we've been structured. And we came up in the slave system here, and yet we all strive above those demeaning shackles, all right? Slavery's in your mind. Now, we know that. We come up black. We're black grown men, survived in this system. Now, we have to pass on to our youth how to get through it. We can linger all day on what happened in the past, but what do we do from here to the next incident? Now, we're here to teach.
And my teaching
how do we get out of this hole?
My teaching would be a systems analysis allows you to relate what happened in the past to what's happening now and what's going to happen in the future.
So what's our
the question of assassination, the question of stealing people's wealth, the question of taking whole people's lands. This Western Hemisphere were the Native Americans, and their whole land was taken from them, and the genocidal process was put in place. You talk about the past, that's happening now.
Okay.
And so we need to be able to link, put the dots together, but see that there's an overarching system in which the wealth is going to go in the hands of a certain few people and a certain few organizations, and we need to begin to look at that structure in a deep way. You get a paralysis of analysis if you just focus on Leopold II, the Belgian king who got control of the Congo. He's in the 1880s. 1884, the German government, they're always the last of the Johnny-come-latelys. They wanted to get involved in the stealing of Africa. And so the Berlin Conference was called. And for 14 months, they met in 1884-85 to divide up Africa. 14 people, you got this piece. America was even there. And that's when, so if we look deeper at these things, that division, which was happening in 1884, happened in 1815 after the Napoleonic Wars, when they divided up, happened in 1915 after 16 or 17 after World War I, happened after World War II, and it's happened now in Africa.
Dr. Jeffrey's assessment is on point because looking at history, you can get an idea of what's going on now. The players are the same. And that is, the European players are the same. When you say, well, where does Trump come from? He's coming out of that deck of cards.
Okay.
And at the same time, rather than doom and gloom, because things are serious, very serious. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad is the most invisible black man who has offered insight into what's going on. He is the most invisible because no one pays attention except those of us who are within the nation. But he said back in '66, he talked about the fall of America. He talked about the decline of the dollar in Message to the Black Man. These are things that he's talking about at that time that you couldn't see, but today you see it. So what am I saying? I'm saying that we have to prepare our youth to be qualified to, quote, run things that will fall into their hands over a period of time. What we're looking at in my estimation, in my assessment, what we're looking at in the political arena here in America is total chaos. It could not have been orchestrated by anyone but a supreme force. So you got them in disarray, and we can see through them. They have been projected as being the mighty, the wise, the architects of industry, et cetera, et cetera. But here's one clown, you know, who wiped out 20 other people from running
the establishment.
And these are people who from the establishment, and he told Bush to shut up and sit down. So when you see something like, you say, whoa, this guy was the governor in Florida. He comes from a leader family, and the guy tells him, shut up. He tells another woman she looks like a horse. And all those cards play. So I'm saying that not to make mockery of the woman or anybody else. We have to prepare our youngsters. Our youngsters are not being prepared for the present nor the future. Brother Jeffries can bear witness to that as an educator. Our children are coming out not knowing, quote, anything. They're not getting homework. They're not getting books to read, you know, reading lists. They're not getting that, even in the so-called better communities where blacks may go. They're only getting this in the so-called elite environments. We have to prepare our children to survive what's going down now. One of the reasons they're killing up, quote, one of the reasons, I'll just say it, one of the reasons they're killing up a lot of black people is that they're going out. They're going out. They're going buck wild so that we don't make it into the hereafter or the future. So when you look at Trump, when you look at all these other things, these are Europeans determining or who have tried to determine how the world would run. The King Leopold story in the Congo, when one of the books I read on him, his own people didn't know what he was doing in the Congo.
Right.
His own nation, they had to stumble across
you could hide things back then.
And in the present. But he did what he did because of who he is, chopping up people's arms and legs is no different from what they do today, telling you that you got a disease or we need to take your leg and that sort of. Some are valid and some ain't. Wow.
You know,
time for a commercial. I gotta go to the Lord for a minute. Let's go to the last prayer from Reverend Pastor Mike, and we'll come back in another 5 minutes. All right. I think it's time for prayer.
Here's what I want y'all to see. There may be somebody here today, a few of us, I know you're already in here. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to come forward. I'll tell you what I'm looking for. This is honesty I need. Those people who came in here today not knowing how they were going to deal and handle or face tomorrow. You came here uncertain about what tomorrow will bring. And I don't mean like we all do. I mean, there are things you're dealing with right now. You're completely unsure. You came here today hoping that something would push you or get you because you're completely uncertain. The job is not working out. The relationship is not working things that I've worked on. If that's you today, I want you to come down and pressure it. I want you to step out. You want to talk to God. That's you. That's His hand. Big chance today. Come on, my business. You make your way down. Come on, fill up down here. Fill up down here. Come on, come on, come on. Come on. Come on. You see? Because let me just say this. I said this at 7:30 service. There's no need to come to church and be pretentious. You come in here and acting like everything. No. There are things you're dealing with, wrestling through, struggling through. Be real about it. Because if you can't be real in this space, where are you going to be real? This is not the space of judgment and condemnation. This is a space of healing and restoration.
Amen.
Too many people come into our houses of worship around this country. They come in wounded. And guess what? They leave maybe sometimes even more wounded. That has to stop.
Amen.
That has to change.
Amen. God bless you.
You are right now just where you need to be. Now you would say, hold on, Pastor, you don't even know what I'm dealing with. No, I don't know what you're dealing with, but I know who's dealing with you. I believe and I trust that it's in these moments of testing and trial and challenge that something beautiful is about to be birthed. And you gotta believe that too. Think about all the things that God has worked out in your life, things you've come through. Do you think the things you've come through to get to this point and stop?
Yes. Yes, sir.
So if you're down here today, you can't down, put your arms around the person next to you. Sing that song, please. I want you to let these things sit.
I know somewhere.
It's a little heavy when he gets into the prayer, but Leroy and I attended, well, I watched it on stream, but Leroy and I watched Tuesday TNT. And you have to, I mean, this is where I send young people who if you want to really get through this mess that we're presenting to people, you need to reach out to God. You got to reach into the spirit that lies within. This is what's gotten us through the last 400 years, 500 years, and all this onslaught, this doom and gloom that we speak about. Because God's in the heart, you know. Love will trump hate. As we had Mrs. Amadou Diallo on last week, and she showed us through all her pain that she rises above. You know, you like Michelle Obama said, they shoot low, you shoot high. With a system analysis and breaking it down, getting rid of that slave mentality. Now, give us a response to what happened last night at the Tuesday meeting.
Last night, he is doing a series on the name, the exact title, but it basically is Living Your Dreams. Why aren't you living your dreams?
Yeah.
But it's not a mystical kind of presentation. He's giving a very practical assessment. He's going chapter by chapter in a particular book.
Yeah.
And the beauty of it is that he is using, he likes to tell stories. He says that.
Great.
He likes to tell stories out of the Bible, which gives me, as a student, gives me insight into portions of the Bible and what they mean to me. I operate on this, going back to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who says that the Bible, this is Mr. Muhammad, he says the Bible is 25% history and 75% prophecy. And that's where we come in as black people. We're in that 75% prophecy. So when I'm listening to a presentation, I'm hearing us. When he's talking about Moses, when he's talking about Joshua, when he's talking about Jesus.
That's right.
He talked about the man, he talked about resistance to being great, your own personal resistance. He talked about when Jesus went to the man and told him to get up off your mat and walk. He said, now the man had resistance. Get off your bed. He said the man had resistance. He said, because he was coming up with all this stuff. He said, well, I've been here for 38 years, and I ain't trying to say. He said that was that built-in resistance.
Slave mentality.
But Jesus told him again, and he told him in a voice where the man did stand up. He said, now, if Jesus, this goes back to doing for self.
That's it.
To getting black people to see the power in them. See, I'm listening to a presentation, but I'm listening to a Mas presentation at the same time, if you understand. Right? I'm listening, brother, and taking notes. So he tells the man to get up. The man gets up of his own power, and he said if Jesus had pulled him up, then he would have made a distance between the man's power and the man himself. Right. But once he told the man to get up, and the man absorbs that, now he's got that energy about himself, what I can do. Yeah, and this is where we are today. We have to encourage in our people, in our families, in our wives, in our church congregation, in our teachers, we have to affirm that they are doing good.
That's right.
Dale Carnegie said, he says, accentuate the positive, leave the negative off. And we begin to affirm in one another, the greatness will come out of us. And which comes out of us anyway when you look at sports and whatnot. You look at the Olympics, the fencing, fencing. There's a brother here in New York, Peter Westbrook. He is producing those people who you see in the Olympics. But more so than that, they are going to colleges. They're getting scholarships. Peter Westbrook, humble brother. You see him, you don't even know he is who he is. But Reverend Waldron at the Corinthian is an asset to the black community because he teaches. That's right. And when you go there, you're not emotionally uplifted. You are mentally uplifted.
Amen.
And that's what we need to do.
Amen. Well, with that, sorry, Doc, we've
you don't have to be sorry.
had a real sermon here today. I'm just advertising
it was meaningful.
My system analysis.
Yes.
And we have 30 seconds.
30 seconds. And I would just add, as you said, we need to reach out for God. I think we need to flip it a little bit and reach in for God and pull out that.
And with that, the God in me loves the God in you. And stay tuned for the Gilchrist Experience.
Who's over there? You keep looking over there.
Bev, where are you, darling? Power to the people. God bless.
We got to give more power to the people.